Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. What's so special about January 26th? Let's find out on today's Advanced Radio. Hello friends, my name is Liz Archer and I'd like to welcome you all to Advanced Studio Classroom, your window on the world. Today is January 26th and we're going to be looking at a holidays article. Believe it or not, there are actually different celebrations going on in different countries on this very special day. And so for the next 2 days, we will be looking at some of these major festivities. And with me in this studio are two other panelists who will be talking and sharing with me about all these festivities. And first of all, we have our dear panelist extraordinaire, Howie. Hi there, Howie.
Oh, thank you, Liz. What a nice intro, and hello again, listeners.
Well, we have Howie, helping us out with all these different topics and subject matters, and that's why I must say you are panelist extraordinaire. Well, and as always, we always have to ask, being, January 26th, we have a special holiday coming up, Lunar New Year's. I need to ask you, Howie, do you have any major plans?
No major plans. I can't go home to America, to New York City for the break. So I'm just going to stay here and just enjoy time with friends.
Okay, that's just as good. And our other panelist is Winnie, one of our newest teachers to Studio Classroom. Hi there, Winnie.
Hi, Liz. Hi, listeners. It's good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. And I also want to ask you the same question. Do you have any plans?
Well, I do have some family here, and I'm really looking forward to eating with them.
Ooh,
yes.
Eating.
Grandma's cooking.
All right, yeah. Well, one mentioned friends, one mentioned family. And for me, my plans are to be with my friends and family. Those celebrations are a great thing, though. I think ultimately it is about being with the people that you care about more than anything. I mean, you can have all the pretty decorations, the nice food, and all the fun games and activities and songs and whatnot. But if you can't enjoy all that with the people that you care about the most, I think the whole experience could be somewhat empty in some ways. But that's just my personal opinion. What do you think, friends? Do you agree? Well, if you have your Advanced magazine, please turn to page 36. Okay, the article we're looking at is called Holidays Here and There. And what does it say underneath the title, Howie?
It says, go home for the Lunar New Year holidays, or go abroad for a different kind of holiday.
Okay, go home for the Lunar New Year. That would be the Chinese Lunar New Year. And personally, I would add the word Chinese when we're talking about this Lunar New Year. Why? Well, there are actually other cultures around the world, and they have their own lunar calendars. And believe it or not, their New Year falls on different dates, not the same way as the Chinese lunar calendar would. And so to avoid confusion or to be clear, I think it's safer to say Chinese Lunar New Year, especially when we're talking about it in English, this international language that's shared by so many other people groups. If we're all talking about Lunar New Year's, we need to be sure which one we're talking about. So personally, I would add the word Chinese just to make sure that there are no confusion. Okay, anyhow, today's holiday focus will be on the Chinese Lunar New Year. And here is our reading for the first part of today's article, Getting Home for the Holidays.
Holidays here and there. Go home for the Lunar New Year holidays, or go abroad for a different kind of holiday. Getting home for the holidays. Picture a crowd spilling out into the road. A vast sea of faces jammed together and blanketing a 4-lane boulevard for a quarter of a mile. It's like the start of a marathon, with luggage. This is holiday travel in China, as trains crisscross the countryside. In the southern boomtown of Guangzhou, hundreds of thousands of workers scramble to get aboard before the Lunar New Year. For many of them, their only trip home of the year. I have no idea if I'll get there, said 26-year-old glass factory worker Sun Zhiyu, her bags piled in a mini mountain around her.
Thank you, Steve, for the reading. So the writer begins this section by painting a picture with words. I say this because the first paragraph is rather descriptive. He begins by asking his reader to picture or imagine something. And what is it, Winnie?
Well, the author asks you to picture a crowd spilling out into the road, a vast sea of faces jammed together and blanketing a 4-lane boulevard for a quarter of a mile. And there's great imagery here. And blanketing is a term that we would suggest that it is covered completely, almost like a blanket, the street with people and luggage all together.
Blanketing. We know the word blanket as a noun. That's what you would cover yourself with when you're sleeping. But we use it whenever we're trying to talk about how something completely covers another thing. Blanketing, like snow, for example.
Sometimes if a place is very dirty, you say, oh, the desk or the tables are blanketed with dust and
That's
dirt.
true. That's true. It's so thick, it's like a blanket.
Yes.
Okay, so we have all these people, and they're packed in this area. And it's like the start of a marathon with luggage. I like that description. So even though there's a lot of excitement as people seem to be getting ready to head somewhere, this is not a marathon. And what is it? The answer is in the next paragraph.
This is holiday travel in China as trains crisscross the countryside. The word crisscross pretty much describes exactly what it looks like. It moves back and forth. So when trains crisscross the countryside, it's moving back and forth and sometimes over itself as well.
Okay, so crisscross, it's like how you would make an X. For example, you go one way and then you go back the other way, forming the letter X. And it's like, if you can imagine train tracks on a map, and the trains going here, going there, they look like they're making the letter X. All right, this is typical. This is what you would see if you wanted to have a view of holiday travel in China. Now, remember, this article is written by a writer who's writing for an American audience, reading the Chicago Tribune. Okay, this is from the observation from a Western perspective of what things are like when people are getting ready to celebrate Chinese Lunar New Year. There are people everywhere trying to travel, trying to get somewhere, and we have a specific location in the southern boomtown of Guangzhou. And what is a boomtown?
A boomtown is a town where the population suddenly increased dramatically, and that might be because there are new jobs or there are new work opportunities there.
Okay, so here in the southern boomtown of Guangzhou, there are hundreds of thousands of workers all scrambling to get aboard before the Lunar New Year. Now, why are they all scrambling? Why?
Well, they're scrambling because they want to be able to go home for the new year. And because they usually work not at their hometown, they would have to travel long ways away. Okay. And this is the only time of the year where they would be able to go.
Okay, so two things to remember. Number one, these workers are far away from home. And number two, this is the only time that they get off to be able to go home and see their family.
I just want to point out to our listeners the word scramble because sometimes we hear of the word scrambled eggs, but we're not describing eggs here. We're describing the way people are moving back and forth. They're in a hurry. They're moving very quickly. They're kind of fighting each other to get aboard these trains. So that's what scramble means.
Right. Like maybe if you've seen ant trails, ants moving in this very orderly way, but then you blow on them, or you kind of interrupt whatever they're doing, and the ants, they get nervous, they freak out, and they're running all over the place. They're scrambling. Okay. Now, the workers here, they've worked throughout the year without any major vacations. Lunar New Year is the only time where they'll get several days off. And we find in the next paragraph one of the workers being interviewed. Now, who is this worker?
Well, it's a glass factory worker, and the name is, there's no tones, but I'm guessing it's Sun Zhiyu. And her bags piled in a mini mountain around her.
Now, why would she have bags piled in a mini mountain around her? What is this mini mountain?
This mini mountain, if you can imagine, is all her luggage. And because she has maybe so much to bring home that it forms almost a small mountain next to her.
Okay. Well, we do have several other people getting interviewed for this article, and we'll be finding out more and finding out what things are like for them. And this is our second reading on page 37, Worth the Wait.
Worth the wait. In Guangzhou, the overflowing crowds at the train station reflect the city's pivotal role as a magnet for workers from across the country. Imagine if all the workers in Washington, D.C. tried to get across the country all at once. Wouldn't you have problems too? Said retiree Liu Hanwen, 56, watching the crowd from an overpass above. And China has a lot more people. But for people in China's hardworking factory class, the prospect of losing the only vacation of the year is too good to give up lightly. Many set out with the stoicism that the Chinese call eating bitterness.
Thank you again, Steve, for doing the reading of the second part. So we're still in Guangzhou with so many people all around, described as overflowing crowds here at this train station. This reflects the city's pivotal role as a magnet for workers from across the country. Now, could you explain pivotal role?
Anytime we use the word pivotal, we're talking about something that's very important, very crucial. So if something has a pivotal role, it has a very, very important role.
All right. So because Guangzhou is such a popular place for people to go and find work, it's so strong that there's this attraction like a magnet. It's to be expected that there would be all these people coming in for work, and at the same time, it's to be expected that these same people will want to leave Guangzhou during the Lunar New Year break. And then we have an interesting comparison made by an older gentleman. I say older because he's much older than the 26-year-old glass factory worker that we've just met. Now, what did this 56-year-old gentleman have to say?
He says, imagine if all the workers in Washington, D.C. tried to get across the country all at once. And later he says, and China has a lot more people.
Okay. Now, who is saying this again?
His name is Liu Hanwen, I'm guessing, and he's age 56, and he's a retiree. Now, retiree, there's the word retire in there. Mm-hmm. And when you add a double E usually to a word, it just means that person is retired. Sometimes we will add another E to a word to say that's what that person does or that's his state. Mm-hmm. So sometimes someone who got hired is a hiree, or an interviewer. The person being interviewed is the interviewee. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we can do that in the English language.
Right, or employer, employee.
That's right.
All right. Now we have this very interesting comparison made by Mr. Liu. Now, friends, remember that this article is written by Evan Osnos for the Chicago Tribune. He was writing for a primarily American audience. So for Liu Hanwen to explain what's happening in Guangzhou, it's understandable that Mr. Liu would use a major city, Washington, D.C., in his comparison to help the Americans understand what's going on. So with all that's going on in Guangzhou and other major cities across China, this could seem like a major hassle to make your way through all these crowds of people. But as we can see in the next paragraph, what does it say?
Next paragraph suggests, but for people in China's hard-working factory class, the prospect of losing the only vacation of the year is too good to give up lightly. And so many set out with the stoicism that the Chinese call eating bitterness.
Okay. As mentioned before, the Lunar New Year break is the only time that these workers could really have a major time off, enough time to go home and be with the family. There's no way that they're going to give up on the chance of going home, even if it's that challenging to make your way through the crowds and try to find transportation. So as we can see in the last sentence of this paragraph, again,
many set out with the stoicism that the Chinese call eating bitterness. Now, that's an interesting-looking word there, stoicism. It comes from the word stoic. Stoic is the adjective of the word stoicism. And when someone is stoic, they don't want to show any emotion or pain. They don't talk about, if they're not happy with something, they're not going to complain or talk about it. They're showing no emotion.
Okay. It is a tough experience just trying to make it home, but since it's worth it, these people are willing to brave it and really do some eating of bitterness, 吃苦. Well, we have one more section to go over. We're on page 37, line 15, the last leg of a journey.
The last leg of a journey. 22-year-old Li Mingli, a manager in a refrigerator plant, had been awake, by his count, for 36 hours. His odyssey included a canceled flight from the city of Hangzhou, various bus trips and waiting in line, 6 hours, to get a flight to Guangzhou, where he hoped to board a last leg by train to his hometown. His hair mussed, his glasses slumped at the end of his nose, he pulled a luggage cart along the asphalt and looked for a shortcut that didn't exist. I haven't been home in a year, Lee said. I have no choice. I have to get there.
If you've just tuned in, this is Advanced Radio. My name is Liz, and I'm here in the studio with Howie and Winnie. We've just finished the reading of the third section of today's article, and this is actually the first part of a two-day holiday article. We're now on page 37, line 15, the last leg of a journey. We have another person here getting interviewed, and who is this person, Winnie?
This person is 22-year-old Li Ming Li, a manager in a refrigerator plant. And he has been awake for about 36 hours trying to get home.
36 hours. He actually had to stay awake for that long. Now, why is that?
That's because his odyssey included a canceled flight from the city of Hangzhou, various bus trips, and waiting in line for 6 hours to get a flight to Guangzhou, where he hoped to board a last leg by train to his hometown. Now, now listeners, you see the word odyssey there, and it says exciting journey in the specialized terms. But if some of you know a little bit of, I guess, Greek history, you may know that word from the title of a book called The Odyssey. And that's a very, very long trip and journey and adventure written by the author Homer.
Mm-hmm. That's right. If you have studied some Western civilization, if you've taken some courses on Western Civ and Western literature, Homer was a Greek writer, and he wrote the Odyssey. And like many other cultures, that we have stories about these fantastic long journeys, and the Odyssey would be one fantastic long journey full of strange encounters with mythical creatures and characters and all that. So we've taken the title Odyssey now whenever we want to get poetic about how someone's trip is just so eventful, a lot of unexpected things happening, a lot of interruptions, and perhaps even some setbacks even. And hopefully our holiday travels don't all have to be odysseys, as the case for Mr. Lee here. Okay, so Mr. Lee, he was originally hoping to fly from Hangzhou to Guangzhou, I'm guessing, but that flight got canceled, so he had to find another way to get home. And going from Hangzhou to Guangzhou is actually not easy, because if you think about it, Hangzhou is close to Shanghai, Guangzhou is close to Hong Kong. And when I say close, I'm using the word loosely. It's not all that close. It's in that general area of China. And so to make that trip from Hangzhou to Guangzhou, and one would normally think if you could fly, fly. Unfortunately, his flight got canceled, so he had to find another way. He tried buses and whatever it takes to get to Guangzhou, but Guangzhou is not his final destination. He still has to hop on a train to get to wherever he needs to go. And it's no wonder he had to stay awake for 36 hours. It certainly sounds like a nightmare.
And this last sentence here on line 20 where he says, this last leg is another way of saying the last part of his trip.
Ah, yes, the last leg. When we say leg, we're not talking about the body part.
Right.
Usually we use leg as a unit, as a way of measuring our trip or a journey.
Sometimes if you're on a race, like even a marathon, you can say he's almost at the finish line. He's at the last leg of the race.
Right. Very good. All right. Well, we have this word here, asphalt, mentioned here. And what is that?
Well, why don't I go ahead and read that paragraph?
Sure.
His hair mussed, his glasses slumped at the end of his nose. He pulled a luggage cart along the asphalt and looked for a shortcut that didn't exist. Now, the word asphalt here is talking about the black mixture used to pave the ground. And so he is dragging his luggage along this ground, and it's that black surface that I think many people would be familiar with.
I must say, this description for poor Mr. Lee, it's so depressing. This poor man's been awake for 36 hours. I'm sure he was so pleased when he first made his plans. He was going to fly from Hangzhou to Guangzhou, and from there he'll hop on a train and get on home. Now, unfortunately, the flight got canceled. So then he has to find plan B, or maybe plan C and plan D. Who knows? So it's taken him 36 hours to get to where he is right now. What a major inconvenience. But why does he do it?
Well, he says in this very last line, I haven't been home in a year, Lee said. I have no choice. I have to get there.
Okay, he has no choice. He has to get there. He has not been home for a year.
Sounds a little bit stoic. I think he's eating bitter, basically. He's not complaining, really. He's not saying, oh, my goodness, what a terrible trip, and I've had all these delays. He's saying, I have no choice. I have to get there. He's not showing much emotion or pain, even. He's just saying, I have to do it.
I have to do it. No one's making him do it, though. I have to do it. It's his choice. And I'm guessing what he's trying to say is this is the right thing to do. You know, of course I have to go home. This is my only time to go home. Of course I have to go home. It's the right thing to do, to be with family. And that's why Mr. Lee and hundreds of thousands of other people, they do this every year. These people understand the importance of being with their families and loved ones during the Lunar New Year break. They understand that it's important to be with these people. You know, sure, you're celebrating. Sure, you know, you have the festivities. But if you can't be with the people you love, you know, it's strange and maybe perhaps somewhat not quite right either. And I guess the same goes for other cultures too. In other countries, we have similar situations, right?
Yeah, when I read this article, I can't relate to it, even though I'm an ABC, because I've never traveled in China before. But I think when I think of all these people and all the scrambling and all the overflowing crowds, I think about in America around Thanksgiving time. It's probably the same. People are always trying to get back home to celebrate Thanksgiving with their family, and this is around late November. And ticket prices are very high. It's hard to find seats, and people are rushing, and people are rude, and sometimes there are a lot of canceled flights. So I've experienced that. So when I read this, and I'm trying to imagine what it's like, I think about Thanksgiving time in the United States.
Thanksgiving, or even Christmas for that matter.
That's right.
You have a lot of people traveling, trying to get from point A to point B, and unfortunately, cancel flights. That happens so often, and you have a lot of angry travelers all around you. So have you ever experienced this, Winnie?
Oh, yes, all the time. And I have friends who've traveled very long distances, maybe not 36 hours, but I think what this article reminds me of is the importance of family and how, you know, a lot of people make a lot of sacrifices for work, not being close to the people that they love, which is why it's so important to take these extra steps to travel during this time. And it just, you know, does become inconvenient when everyone else is trying to travel too. But family is that important. And I think people all over the world can understand that.
That's true. It is such a major inconvenience, but people still do it year after year.
Yes.
You know, it's worth it because they want to be with family. And I think we sometimes hear this expression as the years go by that a certain holiday just isn't the same as it was.
That's
you know,
right.
I keep hearing that. I've heard people say Chinese New Year is not the same as it was when I was a kid. You know, I remember those days were just more festive, more meaningful, whatever. And I don't know why, because I keep hearing it year by year, but from different generations. But I think more importantly, though, I think we need to count our blessings. The fact that we have the people with us, we have the loved ones, the people we care about so much, we're all together again. I think that is something worth being thankful for.
I also find it interesting that even though with technology, we have the internet, we have all these cell phones, still people want to go home. It's so convenient to communicate now. I can even use video now on my computer, and I can even see people like using video conferencing or using something like Skype. I can actually see the person, but it's not the same. You want to go home. You want to be with your family or your loved ones face to face and enjoy the holidays with them. So even with all this technology, with cell phones and computers, it's so important to be with your loved ones during holidays.
That's true.
I would rather get a hug from my grandmother than just to talk to her on the phone or through a video conferencing, you know. And I think so much of part of celebrations is the food. You know, you want to be there to eat and enjoy food with your family. And so that makes it worthwhile. And that's something that technology can never replace.
True.
And back to what you were saying, Liz, I think the importance of rituals or traditions, you know, I think it's one of those things that you have to keep through the years, and you just gotta keep doing it, or else it does become lost. And so that's what this article, I think, is talking about, valuing family, valuing those special times with your family.
That's true. Well, when it comes to this holiday rush, as we call it, I do know some people who are a bit creative. They're willing to give up one day, you know, and travel the day after the madness has died. You know, and I've done that myself, certainly. Rather than trying to get somewhere before Christmas, I travel on Christmas Day.
Right.
And boy, the airports look awfully, awfully, you know, empty. So, but for one thing, the prices are cheaper, ticket-wise, but also I don't have to deal with the mad rush. And I have the whole entire airplane to myself sometimes. So, but obviously with these workers, though, they don't have that option. And they'll do whatever it takes to be with their loved ones. And so, listeners, I don't know what your plans are for this holiday season, but I do hope that no matter where you are, that you can treasure and appreciate the special people in your life. And I hope that you get to celebrate with these loved ones of yours. Well, our time is up for today, and we still have day 2 of this holidays article. That's for tomorrow. We hope you'll join us again to talk about other significant ways to celebrate January 26th. Until then, this is Liz,
Howie,
and
Winnie,
saying goodbye.
goodbye.
bye.